We can plant food forests by planting support species at the same time as the fruit trees and managing the support species to shelter and boost the productive species. Or we can just plant the pioneer support species until we get a stable canopy. But we don't want to go the other way round. We don't want to start with the productive species and work hard with lots of inputs to keep them in a healthy state. The support species do the work for us. It can be up to 95% of the mass in the early years are the legume trees and the mulch producing trees that produce the biomass. We prune these and these trees shed nitrogen to the soil because they have relationships. They're classic pioneers, and most are nitrogen fixing species. In other words, they have rhizobium bacterial partners in the soil that take nitrogen from the air in the soil and bring it into their plant bodies, and they then eventually die and that nitrogen is added to the soil. Now we can speed that process up. We can sacrifice those species with good timing after we've put them into relative placement. So over time, the species we sacrifice open up opportunities for our productive species. They shelter and support and provide the fertilizer, the soil conditioning and the humus. So we stack the system in space, but we prune in relation to time. So we wait for the time of year when there is more rainfall than evaporation. After the period where it's been dry and the evaporation is higher than rainfall, there we need shade and we leave the shade up. But as soon as the rainfall gets heavier and higher than the evaporation, we can start to cut and open up light avenues and space for our productive species to take up the gap. Now, over time, when we get to establishment, we've got less and less mass in pioneer support species and more mass in the productive species. And we end up with a reversal of mass. We have 95% productive and only 5% in support. So we don't just stack in space, we stack in time, and we speed up the process. These legume support trees that have been cut off as pollards may look a bit harsh, but they very quickly start to regrow. You can see here little shoots coming everywhere, and they're all the same. With the regrowth, we get a beautiful shade. Now that's handy in the hot time of year when we've got a lot of evaporation over rainfall, and it's actually a nurse crop for your fruit trees when they're young. Later on, we may cut them more regularly and keep feeding the soil, and eventually we may cut them out at a lower cut. They'll shoot a few more times, we'll keep adding that mulch, and eventually we'll cut them at ground level and not allow them to grow leaves so they actually die out. It's our choice. We're actually manipulating the forest so that it grows in our favor towards productive species. We change the way it grows in our favor. So here you see the pollard regrowth, and in just a few months in the subtropics you can gain all this wood. Now it might be once a year in a temperate climate, once every 6 months, every 3 months in the tropics. You're working with the cycles of the forest within climate, so you're feeding the soil with a fallen forest and you're designing the way the forest falls.